Hello, everybody. I'm just waiting for Joe to jump on, and he's just jumped on. So in the nick of time. So let's just get him on. There we are.
Hello.
Joe, how are we doing?
Good. I'm still here.
Don't worry.
I've still got the background from when we were playing with it yesterday as well. So
it looks.
Great.
I really want to know where you got that piano from, mate. It looks wonderful. What's your
favourite
piece to play?
That's such a good question. Eric Satie, Gymnopody #3.
Okay, I'll have to look that up. Although I do have a music A level, I haven't got a clue what that is. But anyway, moving swiftly on.
It's really lovely. It's a very relaxing piece.
Send it to me later, Joe, and I'll give it a listen. I've probably heard it before, but it just, I'm not very good with names. Although I do remember your names. But yes, so here we are for another Chargeheads live stream, and today we're talking about are electric cars environmentally friendly? And I thought, do you know what, Joe, every time we have a chat, I really enjoy our conversations because there's certain things that you come out with and they blow my mind. And if people don't know, just to intro Chargeheads, I'll introduce myself and I'll introduce Joe. So Chargeheads is basically all about trying to make electric cars more exciting and trying to get people to be more open to looking at electric cars, which are more environmentally friendly, or so we think. And it's a good point of discussion today. My name's Tim. I started Chargeheads about 3 years ago. We've got an electric TVR, which we've been building for a while with Ralph Hosier, and that's using used batteries, used motors, and trying to make it as green as possible, low carbon footprint. We've got a modified Tesla Model 3, which I modify, some might say tastefully, others might not so, try and use used parts where possible. And we've got a 1970s trike, which is a similar sort of thing, but check out the channel and all the videos for those builds. So there we go. And for a living, 9 till 5, I used to be in the car trade and now I sell chargers for a living. But Joe, if you could give everyone an intro, that'd be great.
Yeah, okay. So what did I do? I studied music, actually, funny enough, actually, with the piano.
Did you really?
At Liverpool Uni, yeah.
Oh, wow.
I studied like music and music production, and actually the final thing that I did was I tried to make a synth controlled by a goldfish. So we put like an X and Y grid on the goldfish tank. It sounded fucking terrible, to be honest with you. But every time it would enter a different grid structure, it would kind of trigger a different sound to come through. And so it was sort of trying to, actually get something controlled by nature even back then.
So as it swam into a different location on the tank, it made a different noise?
Yeah. So it was just like an XY grid, basically. So you sort of overlaid an XY grid over the tank. And I had to do it manually, so I had to like frame by frame, like plot where it was. It was like 2012.
Do you think the fish could hear the music? Do you think it did it get
I
used
hope
to
not. I hope not. It was really bad. It needed a lot of work. There's some people now doing some really interesting things with kind of like biomimicry and biomusic. And they're making it sound really nice. And they're kind of attaching different things to mushrooms and trees. And they can, take those signals that are coming through from the plants in real time and then process them in a way that's sort of pleasing to the ear. And that's the bit I didn't quite get. It was just very like, very binary.
Bit kind of UK techno without the bass.
Without the bass, without the rhythm, without the joy. just like a goldfish going across and making some slightly obscure sounds.
So Joe, tell us about your electric history. How did it all come to pass?
I think, it's almost like a bit of a rabbit hole. Like when I was really young, I absolutely loved cars. So like Gran Turismo was my go-to game when I was sort of growing up. But left it for a while and sort of disconnected from cars completely. And then only relatively recently just got this real desire to learn as much about them as possible. And just went down a real rabbit hole of sort of exploring what's going on with EVs and EV conversions and how we can sort of make, a better mark on the planet by adapting what we're doing and how we're doing it and trying to figure out the sort of best processes there as well. So it's just been a lot of learning as well, because I've had different ideas and theories, and then sometimes you learn and you're like, oh, somebody's already done that or tried that and it didn't work because of X, Y, or Z. And so there's been a lot of sort of like learning and lessons and trying to understand, and I'm still very much at that early stage as well, trying to understand like what makes sense and what doesn't make sense and why.
Yeah.
And you know, Tesla does make sense, to be honest. That's one of the conclusions I've got.
Well, it was Jerome from EV Builders Guide that introduced us, and yeah, when you started talking about your concept and talking about your passions of more from the environmental side, completely got it, because that's what I was with Chargeheads trying to bring together, my love of cars and my love of the environment, and it is a tricky thing to fuse, especially to make it viable from a commercial point of view, but yeah, tell us what you're doing with Foreva Cars.
Foreva Cars, the idea is to accelerate the EV conversion industry, just because it makes sense. Like you said, it's electrification makes sense. I mean, we can go into that in a minute, but I think everybody probably realizes that and gets that. But there's some areas that we can explore a little bit more. But upcycling just makes the most sense, and it's not a new thing. It's mirroring what nature's always done. Like a leaf falls off a tree and then it becomes the soil. It's nothing new. It's not a new concept. It's just that circularity and the regenerative nature of what goes on. And so the ideal is to keep things going for a good while. And actually, like, your projects are kind of the epitome of doing things properly, because you're really taking
exactly. And my target audience obviously is get everyone involved, of course, who's into cars. I do like a hard sell, and hard sell for me has always been the petrol heads of this world, the die-hard petrol heads, and trying to make electric cars exciting. You can still make things exciting. I mean, the only negative with putting a massive electric, used, repurposing a massive electric motor in the back of a classic car or whatever car you want to fit it to, could be a go-kart. I saw I have to remember the YouTube channel, but there's a great YouTube channel, and they put this really big, I think it was a motorbike motor or something like that, in this child's toy, and it was just way overpowered.
I saw the exact same video. Did they crash into a wall?
I'll find it in a second. I'll find it while I'm chatting. And it was so fun, and everyone was having a giggle. But this is where I constantly, and I don't know if you're like this at all, but I get taught quite a bit where, I want to go down the more environmental route, electric, less CO2 emissions and all the rest of it. And the ideal is to actually have, electric car with good regenerative braking. So not only are you not using the brakes, so, you're saving on the brake dust, which is obviously not so great for the environment, and you're saving on your tires. And people would argue, oh, electric cars are a lot heavier. You're going to use your tires more. You can use your brakes more. Only if you're giving it the pasty all the time. And I'm no stranger to giving it some pasty occasionally, but it's difficult. This is the problem. You can't be perfect. And, if you want to be perfect and not, emitting, whether it's CO2, brake dust, tire dust, all the rest of it, you might as well just walk. But what's your view on it, Joe?
Perfect doesn't exist, and I don't think it exists in the universe. I think you've got light and dark for a reason, and you've got this sort of polarity of just, however the Big Bang started, who even knows, and most of the universe is dark matter. And I don't know if there is a perfection, and I don't know if we should be striving for perfection. I think perfection is enjoying yourself as much as possible, and I think the best ideas come out of that state of enjoyment and actually making the most out of life. And I think that's what really matters. But if we can do that and try and harmonize ourselves with the ecosystems that support our lives at the same time, that's the absolute epitome. And that's why I think it's the most interesting thing to take on these challenges, because yes, we can live in a permaculture environment, grow all our own veggies and just walk around. And that's all really, really possible for us to do. It's just a case of choosing differently. And I think Bill Mollison says this, and he was one of the founders of permaculture, and he said, the problems of the world get increasingly complex, but the solutions remain embarrassingly simple. And what he's getting at is the fact that, yeah, you can just walk if you so choose to. But I think the fun is in doing those exact things. It's like, how do we do or achieve something that is fun in a way that's not impacting the world, or is even adding to the world, or, you know, adding to our experience of the world. And I think that's where the really interesting stuff lies. So yeah. I think you've done amazing in terms of taking on that challenge of not necessarily convincing people, but opening up conversations on how do we make this topic as fun as possible. And I'd like to hear more from you in terms of how that's been and what, you know, what you've discovered en route.
It's been a hard road. You know, I've been going quite a long time now. I've been plugging away because Chargeheads, according to Facebook, which come up recently, it's 3 years old from a Facebook point of view. So that's when I started it. And then, so I started the YouTube videos, I think it was in January. So about a month after that. And then, yeah, started on the look for the project, you know, the TVR, the electric TVR, TVR Wedgie, as it's fondly known, only by me. Yeah. And yeah, I mean,
how come it's known as the Wedgie? What's the Wedgie story?
Just the Wedgie, so the electric TVR, so the repurposing of the batteries, repurposing of the Tesla motor, and yeah, just to explain to everyone. So what I was trying to do is essentially I had a 5-litre V8 TVR Griffith, which was fast, it was loud, it was exciting. You know, that's what it was all about for me. You know, is to get away from it all, feeling, you know, feeling like I needed a bit of an injection of life, if you like. You take that sort of car for a drive, certainly from my point of view, and it puts you closer to life, because you put a foot wrong and you're dead. I mean, that car is dangerous. It's got all the excitement. The there's a great, I have to think about it. It just, you know, the orchestra, it's an event, you know, and everyone talked about electric cars, about, you know, you're losing your soul, you're losing that. And I think this is what the challenge I wanted to pick up is, do you know what? Can we get that type of electric drivetrain into a car and have that same, you know, excitement by, do you know what, I can take that for a drive down the country roads, bring it back, and I've had my fix, you know. So, and to make it as green as possible. So taking something.
How do you experience life? Like, you know, describe what you're feeling before you've had that fix.
Yeah, a little bit. I suppose everybody would be in that sense where whether it's a 9 till 5, everything gets a bit monotonous. You need something to get closer to, you know, say living, closer to feeling alive. You know, some people, I think what's really, really great, especially from a mental health point of view, you know, going for walks, going for a run, you know, getting out of the box that we live in, staring at a screen, going to work, being on the commute, you know. And for me, back then, because unfortunately the TVR Griffith 5-litre V8 I had to sell to help fund the project. And ironically, the owner sent me a video of it today. Thanks, Lee, if you're watching. Rubbing it in. No, I don't. Do you know what? I don't miss it, because I'm really excited about this new adventure. But how am I feeling? Melancholy? Is that the right?
Yeah, maybe it's whatever word is true. Like, that sounds, I can definitely relate to that as well. And then what about post drive?
Oh yeah, I mean, that's, you know, you're on cloud 9. You've got your hit of dopamine or whatever that gives me, you know. And I think the only thing that this particular EV project's TVR Wedgie, electric TVR, will potentially miss is the manual gearbox. So having that interaction with the manual gearbox. Some might argue it's going to be the noise, and a lot of people say, "Oh no, you only buy the TVR for the noise." I promise you now, I did not buy the TVR for the noise. when I was looking for a car, because I used to be into drifting quite a lot.
Yeah.
So I had Skylines, I had, you know, Nissan 200SX S14, so plenty of tire emissions, I'm afraid to say, Joe.
I didn't even know it was a thing until you know, a while ago. I think this research in terms of ocean microplastics is only in the last few years to really.
Yeah, no, we'll come on to that in a minute, because I was really bowled over by that. But yeah, so basically, potentially missing the noise. But when I was trying to find a car to replace what I had at that point in time, it was all about the excitement and all about the feeling. And the TVR had it in spades. So I just want to make sure I try and get that excitement in the TVR wedgie build. And as I was saying, yeah, so I might be missing the manual gearbox. People will say I'll miss the noise, but the way that Ralph and I have, well, mainly Ralph, because he's the one that's engineering it, but how we expect to have this TVR is to have as much noise from the electric motor as possible by getting rid of all the sound deadening. It might be quite a, it's not going to be like a Tesla to drive, put it that way. It's going to have that feeling, which is going to be interesting, because I was going to use it as my daily, but it's not going to probably be the most comfortable electric cars. But going back to what you said to me the other day about the tire emissions. Now, I've certainly created a hell of a lot of tire emissions in my life, and I do still really kind of want to take the EV drifting to try and get that type of petrol head into electric cars. However, what did you say to me the other day, Joe, about tire emissions?
Oh, this is just something I found out myself as well, because I had no clue. But they've discovered that 78% of ocean microplastics is coming from car tires. So the really fine particulate. Yeah.
Let's not forget about trucks, vans, and buses. That's unbelievable.
Yeah, it's the majority basically. I mean, even there's another one by Plymouth in the UK, and that estimated 65% for the UK. I guess the UK's got other extra forms of plastics, but on average globally, I think 78 was the
and you also talked about a different type of material being used for tires. I nearly fell off my seat. Hang on, let me just secure myself.
This. I mean, it's dandelions, so it's the little weeds we get in our garden, and this is just research that Continental were doing over a decade ago, I think, or probably a decade ago now in terms of when they started it, and they were looking at it for you know, shifting away from fossil fuels. I think was already on their radar. But also in terms of the limitations of natural rubber that could come from certain trees that would only grow in those equatorial regions. So they were looking at sourcing more natural rubber supplies, and they found that, well, I think a German laboratory found that the Russian dandelion produces a rubber, like a latexy rubber, that in effect they tested, and they put it on the track, and it's, you know, got to the same safety standards as their sort of winter tires and things. But their issue is now.
Go on, sorry.
No. I think their issue is now is kind of scaling the agriculture side of it in terms of getting enough supply of this dandelion to make.
I'm thinking if the Russian, just as a thought in my head, get quite a few.
Yeah.
Is the Russian?
How are we going to solve that conflict?
Would be the tough tire, you know, it'd be the tough rubber, so it'd be like a hard wearing, good for long distances. But maybe you need something soft from maybe. Let's try not to be controversial here. Let's just say France, like a softer dandelion, which is extra a soft.
Maybe.
But yeah,
that'd be really interesting if the plants had sort of, you know, the characteristics of people that we sort of put on them. I think that'd be amazing. What would the British rubber be, do you reckon?
Yes, the British. Well, I don't know. God, that's certainly been changed in the last decade with all the stuff that's going on. But let's not dim the mood. But yeah, to dim the mood slightly though, the rubber, you know, not only was it the Ford Motor Company, Henry Ford, you know, he pretty much cleared a load of the Amazon, or harvested a lot of the rubber trees in the Amazon, and there was contractors that went down to the Amazon and pretty much killed a load of the local tribes and stuff to get the rubber in the first place. So, you know, the car industry has been horrific for the environment. We've got to be honest with ourselves.
100%. And I think like not even just the environment, I think like socially as well, like the colonialism that's sort of embedded there, like within the DRC and the Belgian history that goes back with all of that. And I think, you know, there's been, and actually now with lithium as well, because what I find quite interesting is obviously they've got the lithium triangle, and they.
Don't worry, it doesn't matter if you're late. Sorry, carry on, Joe.
They found so they were using evaporation pools for lithium currently. So on the salt flats, you know, they do it in stages. So they'll gradually get the lithium in the brine more. What's the word? Where there's more lithium within the content of the brine, because the rest of it just evaporates away. So, but that uses quite a lot of water. Yeah, I'm sure the word will come. Yeah, it's just the amount.
The solution sort of thing.
Yeah. Someone Google it. It's a very simple word. I don't know where it's not going. But the issue is that they were finding kind of with the indigenous people there that they were struggling because they were using a lot of water, so the water table was going down quite rapidly.
Right.
But as soon as they discovered lithium deposits in California, the land was too expensive to do that process around it. And so then they were like, oh, could we do this differently? And they're like, we could do this differently. So now, like, if you look at, I think Sandy Munro did a little tour of Energy X the other day, and they're talking about direct lithium extraction. And basically, they've created a process where they drill down into the brine deposits, and instead of bringing it to the surface and doing that evaporation, they've just improved the process. So you kind of like put it through like a Brita filter type tap system. They take out the lithium and then they put the brine straight back down.
Right.
So it's like when it's in, you know, California or somewhere like that, it's worth more monetarily, and when it's sort of somewhere out of sight, out of mind, people are less likely to like go, oh, do we really need to do that? But some of the most creative solutions come.
I feel like we need Ewan McTurk, who's going to be on the show in a few weeks' time. I think it's the second week in January, or third week, and he's a battery specialist. So this would be a good question for him. I was going to say, look, you know, I know that battery chemistry is, you know, changing rapidly. So obviously lead, then, you know, there were NiCad batteries, and then the most popular batteries recently to get EVs going has been an NMC. So which is obviously got the cobalt in. That's what the C stands for. And now everything's going more towards LFP, and now sodium's coming on the bandwagon as well. So I think there's so much focus on making electric cars more environmentally friendly, whether it's, you know, the Congo mines, you know, looking after the people that are mining it and making sure. And I think there is a body out there, which Ewan told me about actually, that
there is.
The cobalt is from a better source and not, you know, mined by children. Although, you know, mobile phone companies and all the electronics, you know, it's not come into that conversation, and they're clearly getting it from those sort of places.
Or even fossil fuels use the cobalt as part of the process as well. I can't remember.
Refining oil. I'm sure they couldn't give two hoots about, you know, where the cobalt comes from. So it's interesting that there's this microscope on EVs and anything that happens, which is great because everything's going electric. I say everything, 99% of everything's going electric anyway. So it is great to have this microscope in hindsight, because we know it's going to be much better for the environment. But when people say, oh no, so I always do this voice when I'm taking the piss out. Oh no, you know, EVs are bad, you know, they're setting fire, the cobalt mines and everything else. It's like, hang on a minute, look at what you currently got. You're being that critical with EVs, but you're not being critical with ICE cars or, you know, diesel, hydrogen, where the hydrogen comes from. Honestly, it's quite frustrating. But, you know, to look at it from a bigger picture, I think in the long run, I think it will be good for the future of our transport.
Of everything, I really do think so as well. I think, I mean, the reason a lot of people don't think that is because it's not been thrust in their faces so much. Whereas with EVs, there's obviously an existing business model that is a threat. And so there's been a lot of amplification of certain topics. And if you sort of dive into, if you do a quick Google search for the Atlas network, with Atlas network DSMOG, you find some very interesting things. These little think tanks, 500 plus global think tanks, funded by the
Was it Atlas network? What? Sorry.
So look for the Atlas network, but then put in DSMOG as well. So DSMOG is a publication that focuses on sort of climate-focused journalism.
We're having that conversation. We need a Jamie.
Dude, that was it, Jamie. Yeah.
Jamie. We need a Jamie.
Bring it up, Jamie.
Bring it up, Jamie.
Bring it up, Jamie.
11 years. Atlas Network is a Washington, D.C.-based non-profit organization. Itself is working to support a growing network of 500 free markets organizations. Okay. Yeah, take a look, people. There's probably too much in there for me to start about it now. Oh, whoops. There we go. Yeah, probably a bit too much to talk about there. But yeah, take a look. It looks quite interesting, that. So yeah, it's, to go back to the original question, are EVs better for the environment? I think they are. And better for the environment. They're not perfect. We talked about that right at the beginning. Nothing's perfect. I think the scenario, again, that we spoke about recently in our last conversation is the fact that, a lot of people forget that, yeah, okay, batteries can be quite carbon intensive. However, batteries can be recycled. 95% of EV batteries can be recycled.
Yeah.
And it's used again. They don't have to do any of the mining. They don't have to transport those materials again to, as far as they need to from lots of different places. So, ultimately, and, that's if they're not in second life battery storage or in EV conversions like mine, which is a smaller amount, let's be honest. So, it's of course it's better. We've got a few questions here. Here we go. Have you seen, thanks Zoe, have you seen the latest news about ICE cars being almost impossible to register in China? Dealerships struggling to sell and beginning to offer 45% off list. Now, this is because, Zoe, there is very strict regulations coming in where I think it's some form of tax where if they register it after a certain date, you get taxed the hell out of it. So they've got all these ICE cars, petrol, diesel, what have you, which they cannot shift because nobody wants them. It's old technology. They're going to get charged a hell of an amount. It's a bit like an MOT, or it's a bit like Euro standard, the emission standard in this country, but it's really, really harsh. And, the likes of Toyota, VW, all these legacy automakers are in a hell of a lot of trouble. And I'll tell you what, I'm pretty sure, Joe, aren't Chinese cars right-hand drive? I'm pretty sure they are.
I don't know that much about Chinese cars. I don't really want to comment.
I think they're right-hand drive. I know what's going to happen. They're going to be repurposed into Australia, Thailand, and potentially in the UK as well. We're pretty much the second-hand graveyard for ICE cars. I think that's what might happen as well. So yeah, people would argue that there's graveyards of EVs, but it's probably graveyards of EVs that aren't as good as the other EVs that are available, and people want the desirable ones. So, they're left-hand drive, Foxanne. Oh dear. Yeah, Foxanne's said that they're left-hand drive. I thought they were right-hand drive. After all the opium stuff that happened in history of the UK.
Right. Yeah, that's all great.
When we blew them up a bit. Yes, the horse feed industry weren't as well organized as the oil peeps.
That's it. Because if the horse feed industry had a lobbying, the same lobbying capacity as the fossil fuel industry, we'd still be driving horses.
Sorry, I didn't quite get the link there.
Or it would have delayed it by another 10 years, maybe. Yeah.
True. Well, you hear about all the, in New York, and I'm guessing London was the same. The reason why there's steps up to the house is because it was just horseshit everywhere, And you had the old snuff or the the roses, pocket full of posies, a tissue, that was death. Okay. it's just Hong Kong that's right-hand drive. That's what I was thinking of. Thanks, Zoe. God. And yeah, of course, Japanese right-hand drive. I've had my fair share of right-hand drive vehicles. So yeah, I mean, another thing that kind of, now we're on the rant stage now. I feel a rant coming on. You know, the fact that no, it's gone.
Well, I would just say, I mean, just before we, because I want to hear your rant when it comes to you, and I want it to come back in full force. But just to get something in there before we leave the battery thing completely, I see EVs as just the supply chain and the line in for electrification of homes as well. And so if we're going to shift away from fossil fuels and power on our grid systems and structure, I believe almost all EV batteries will have a second life as grid storage or home wall storage. And so it's not going to be recycling. You know, when they hit that sort of 70% usage or whatever it is, that's going to be grid storage, it's going to be home storage. And if we want to shift away from fossil fuels, the only way to do that and the only way to fund that effectively is to do it via the medium of cars. So the more cars that they can create now, the better. The more EVs that we can sell, the better. The batteries are not going to go to waste. They're going to get used.
There's a huge market, you know, and if you're young and thinking about, oh, what should I do? What should I do? And you want to earn some money, and you do give a damn about the environment, you're into like the technical side of things, you know, to be able to repurpose car batteries safely, you know, with the right, you know, right tools and the right safety procedures, there's a hell of a lot of money to be made in, you know, battery storage, and lots of companies that can that are already popping up to make best use of that. I don't think enough of that is happening at the moment, and battery prices are dropping like a stone. I mean, I bought my 44 kilowatt hour MGZS pack for £4,500, which 2 years ago was a bloody good deal. And now you can get a 70, I think it's a 76, 77 kilowatt hour pack for a Tesla for about £5,000 now. So battery prices are, used ones, coming down. The Tesla Model 3 batteries are quite hard to put in anything because they're really long rather than the brick-shaped ones out of the S and the X. I remembered the rant now. I was going to say that.
Bring it.
Bring it on. So a lot of people were saying, you know, oh, China, why should we be clean when China are really dirty? They've got loads of coal power, you know, power stations, the rest of it. Bearing in mind, yeah, they do have coal power stations, but they're making like 75+% of the world's, you know, manufactured bits. But they are also the biggest solar producer and solar adopter. And, you know, they are accelerating that because they know and they realize that not only do they need the electricity with all the EVs and everything's going electric, but it's the cheapest way to make electricity. You know, cost of power stations and cost of, you know, and obviously the climate cost. You know, it's people that I think they just don't really understand or don't know the facts with.
I think so, and there's been all of these stories that, again, it's sort of been funded by the fossil fuel industry. It's all sort of linked to that Atlas network stuff. But you know, the recycling rates of wind turbines, of solar panels, blah blah blah. But when you actually dig into it, there's so many incredible people working on these topics, and so there's a few Australian researchers, for instance, that found a really simple, straightforward way to recycle solar panels much cheaper. And you know, they were using they were relying on a lot of chemicals before that, and sort of, but they basically use a microwave. So the same thing that we have in our kitchens. They found that by heating up the panels, it made it easier to delaminate certain aspects of the thing, which made the recycling process so much easier. So they're basically building these giant microwaves, which bring the cost of recycling solar down massively. And in Europe, there was always laws around, you know, needing to recycle these things. But in the US, it was a little bit more lax. So there were a few stories of people just dumping solar panels because it cost slightly too much to recycle them. But that cost of recycle is just coming down and down and down and down and down and down. So there's really no reason, because we can recapture and we can reuse a lot of the stuff that's in there. I think almost 100%. You know, it's never quite, but it's like it's getting there. So
I think there's
No, go.
I was going to say the key message, you know, reuse, repurpose, recycle.
Yeah.
It's, you know, that's what it's all about. And I was having some really interesting conversations from a chap, because in my day job, supplying chargers, installs, etc., going to see a company that we work closely with, which is a Renault truck and Maxus Chinese brand EV dealer. And it's really interesting, we're having that conversation about, a lot of car manufacturers. And this is why I was talking about, because Zoe's just put about VW recruiting 3,000 engineers in China, trying to rebuild their brand over there. They're making a load of people redundant in Europe, and they bought Xpeng, a Chinese brand, and they're going to be making a load of vehicles in China because it's going to make them competitive because the labor is so cheap in China, and then they're going to ship them back again. That isn't really environmentally friendly, because again, you're shipping the cars back over to here. It's the economics of it, the capitalist world of, you be able to be competitive in this world. You need to have a cheap labor force. You need to have cheap raw materials and get it to market in a with a competitive price. Which, yeah, and
I mean,
people
shipping can be sort of decarbonized as well. I mean, there's lots of advancements with it. They're putting kind of wind. It's not really an advancement, it's just like going back a few hundred years, like they're putting wind again on massive container ships, and like, oh, look at this thing, it works for us, and it sort of reduces the amount of oil and everything they need. But I think the bigger issue with shipping is they impact whales and their migration routes, and then whales have got quite a big impact on the ecosystems as well. And I believe it was around 50% of all shipping is linked to fossil fuels in some way, shape, or form. So if we shift away from those, we also reduce close to 50%.
I think there is a lot of work getting done in shipping, for sure, because there's certainly some cleaning up that needs to be done, because it's just all the crap from the dirtiest fuel imaginable that goes into those shipping containers and big vessels like that. But I know there's a lot of work going on. I did hear that Dover port was asking for many gigawatts of power to be able to charge potential vessels. And having worked in the charging trade for X amount of time, we've had companies contact us that have electric vessels, water boats, etc., and some that are hybrid of hydrogen and electric, which is quite interesting. I think hydrogen probably makes more sense, green hydrogen that is, for shipping, because from a transport point of view, you only have to have it at the ports, which is going to be a lot easier. But transporting hydrogen around, there's blatantly going to be a huge explosion of a boat at some point, but transporting hydrogen around and having it for personal cars just isn't going to be a thing. I think people are absolutely off their heads if they think that hydrogen is actually going to be for personal cars now. There's 3 hydrogen stations, and I'm sure their hydrogen is some of them are just not green at all, and that's the whole reason why you want to go hydrogen in the first place. No, it's not 1.121 gigawatts. So I think there's a line from Back to the Future there. So yeah. So how can we be even greener with our transport, other than not from a car point of view? Do you think, Joe? Are there any what do you currently do from your transport point of view?
I mean, I would say don't actually look at it as transport. I think it's more, it can be quite hard to look at things in a, it can be useful to look at things in a silo, and then it can be even more useful to look at things as a big connected picture and image. So the fundamental, more useful objective is to shift the world away from fossil fuels, from burning of fossil fuels. I think that's the key objective. And so when we look at just EVs, we're more inclined to focus on the challenges with batteries, and they're not perfect, and they're But when we see that they're just drip feeding into grid storage and into power storage for homes as well, and they're going to accelerate that process, then it's like, that's exactly what we need. And then at a certain point, the big thing I think for the automotive industry is going to be FSD. So one full self-driving, like fully self-driving car is going to do the job of 3, 4, 5 regular cars. Cars are parked for 90% of the time. So for many of those people who don't care how they get somewhere, as long as they can get somewhere quickly in, you know, comfort from A to B, you know, effectively, there's going to be a lot of self-driving cars that support that, and that's going to reduce the total number of cars on the road, and that's going to reduce massively from 2.5 billion to 500 million to 800 million total cars required. And so it's going to be a little bit like that. What's the song? They paved paradise and put up a parking lot. Joni Mitchell. It's the ideal is to put that song into reverse. So we can turn car parks into little community orchards or places like that, because suddenly, as soon as we have FSD set up, there's going to be a lot more space for that. And so I think the key is to focus on that end goal and that vision, to support and to accelerate those technologies that are going to actually help us exist and coexist, because all of the downstream and upstream effects that they have on all of the mining things and the systems, that's all going to be mitigated by several billion cars.
And it's Tony Seba that was the guy that first talked about that. So if anybody wants to find out about that type of scenario, Tony Seba, S-E-B-A, he's got a YouTube channel, it's all on there, and he's talked about this I think it's a number of years ago actually, but that does seem to me make complete sense. Yes, there will be occasions where, you know, slightly more bespoke type of driving, whether that's, you know, long distance, or, you know, on a farm, that sort of thing, or commercial vehicles might be slightly different, but absolutely that is definitely the way. The taxi yellow big, do you mean
exactly,
the taxi?
Yeah, thank you, Foxton. That's perfect description for it. It's big taxi yellow taxi, so the reverse of that is taxi yellow big.
Oh, I thought
paradise.
Okay, so I thought she was talking about Johnny Cab from Total Recall. I don't know if you remember that film.
I remember the title of it, but I don't remember watching it.
Absolute classic. Well, we're talking about full self-driving, and it's the thumbnail, of course, on this video episode. Which, thank you for giving me an insight into that, because I was just about to watch that film. I'm only halfway through, so no spoilers.
I've not seen it either. I just saw the trailer.
Have you not? I've seen the bit where the Teslas start to go a bit full self-driving on everybody.
Yeah.
So it reminds me of a film. There was a Stephen King film where all the trucks just decided to start killing everyone, and, you know, the Coke machine started firing out Coke cans at everyone. I can't remember which film that was. It was like a early 90s or an 80s film. Can't remember which one, but yeah, I tell you what, I think cars, I think people, if they've got a driveway, and they're able to get a charger fitted, affordability is a lot of it, but in some ways, the savings that people can make, you can't afford not to, you know. Obviously it's the initial outlay, which is always a struggle, but there are a lot of deals out there where you get a charger fitted for free. But there's so much money you can save by having a night rate. I mean, I'm paying, just as an example, 9.5 pence per kilowatt hour, which is the unit measured for electric, from 12 till 7. And with how efficient, because, you know, efficiency does work in petrol cars, and diesel, and also in electric cars. So you take a big, massive Audi electric car, they're actually the least fuel efficient, obviously, or least electric efficient. But the Tesla that I've got, it's, you know, really good. Even today, it's pretty cold today, 4 miles per kilowatt. It's like 2 pence per mile. I'm laughing, you know, it's cheap as chips, really. You know, that's why I've racked up so many miles on my Tesla. It's done 90,000 miles now and still going strong.
So from a charging perspective, how are things looking in general? Because there seems to be, you know, more and more installs. There's even a few garages, or, you know, BP have bought a few sort of Tesla units. Like, what's that space looking like?
Yeah, I was leading up to that. So basically, I think if you can afford it, whether that's, you know, if you've got the money to start with, or if you can, and most people fund their cars these days anyway, if you can fund it, you'll probably be able to save money. It's just finding the right car that's got the right range, and taking to account that, I'll give you my wife's example. once a year, maybe twice, once a year, where she hasn't got the range to be able to do her week's holiday, there are ways of getting around that. You could hire a car, but then you lose, in the busy week that it tends to be, it will take up most of the money that you saved, unfortunately. Or in my case, in my wife's case, I'll swap cars with her and I'll have the low range car and she can have the Tesla. So there are ways around it. But yeah, in terms of having a car, the infrastructure now this year, as you mentioned, Joe, I mean, there's so many EV charging stations out there that are popping up everywhere. So I don't think now, other than certain areas, you could argue the depths of Devon and Cornwall, some areas in the north where there will be blank spots, but I don't think there's much of an excuse. If you've got a electric car with 150 mile range plus, I don't think you can argue that there's not enough public charging out there. I wouldn't disagree that, reliability can sometimes be an issue, not on Tesla. And the cost, public charging cost, on something like a Tesla network, anything from 30 to 50p. Most of the public networks out there are like 69, 75p and higher. So it's like almost double the price, which isn't ideal.
And where are they mostly getting their power from, in terms of, because obviously Tesla are trying to integrate solar as much as possible with their stations.
I don't know about Tesla. I mean, they've put a lot of infrastructure out there. I don't know for sure, but I'm assuming that there is some form of battery assistance there. And this is the main issue for what I've seen with my current role as rolling out, and supplying chargers and sites coming to us and talking about, we want a 150 kilowatt or a 200 kilowatt charger. There's just, in most cases, 90% of cases, there's not enough power there. It's not the fact that we haven't got enough generation from the power stations and, whether it's solar, offshore wind, etc. It's the fact that the grid, it's getting the power there. And I know that the grid, the national grid is doing a lot of work to try and get as much power to the places that need it as possible. But what we're seeing now is it is literally a power grab. So if you are looking as a business to have a decent amount of power for charging, whether that's to charge your own vehicles, charging, if you want to make a business out of it, and it's not cheap, mind you, it's not just putting the chargers in. It's, paying for the service and maintenance to make sure it's reliable, having a back office system, the install cost, the commissioning cost. It's not, there's more to it than just the chargers, people. And then potentially extra cost from the electric, from the national grid or your DNO that might charge you more for the higher power. So yeah, there are all these challenges with it. But yeah, the power ideally would come from the grid, but it's, like I said, it is a power grab at the moment. And, it's everybody at the moment wants it. I say everyone, there's a large amount of people that want it. So costs, supply and demand works in all industries. It's going to be, it's not cheap, and it is tricky, but if that's the route you want to go, then I would suggest any business owner or anyone that's thinking about it, you need to do it sooner rather than later, for sure. So yeah.
Who would you recommend they do it with? Do you want to give them give your workplace a little plug?
Sorry, my daughter is eating chocolates very loudly, eating my munchies. Sorry, say again, mate. I didn't hear.
Who would you recommend that they do it with? Who is it that you're are you allowed to give them a plug?
This show isn't all about promoting Chargeheads I work with, but Joe, seeing as though you've and this was not planned, it's Vital EV.
It wasn't.
Vital EV, award winning. We recently won a Green Fleet Award for best workplace fleet charging business. But yeah, we do EV solutions for cars, trucks, buses, and yeah, high power solutions. We've got the fastest DC charger in the UK at Millbrook Proving Grounds, 400 kilowatts, 800 volt. I don't think there's any vehicles that can take that kind of power yet. But what is really good, we do these movable DC chargers, which can plug into like a 32 amp or a 63 amp 3-phase connection. And as soon as you plug them in, within 5 minutes, you can charge up to 40 kilowatts on anything that's got a CCS connection, which is great for events and things like that. But what I found is when people want to have these chargers to charge at an event and things like that, is 9 times out of 10, okay, great. If you've got the right socket there and the right plug to be able to charge it, great. But most of these events are in fields, you know, and they haven't got a grid connection there. So they might need to use a generator. They might have to use a battery, and a battery will only last so long because, as you might know, some people might know, 150 kilowatt hour battery, which is about 2 Tesla batteries. You know, once you charge 2 Tesla batteries, that's it. Those are like half the size of a container. I mean, they're pretty big. So then you're looking at, unless you're swapping them out all the time, which costs a lot of money, you're then looking at a diesel generator or a HVO generator, which is slightly better on efficient CO2 emissions, but it's not great in other emissions. And ultimately, what we're trying to do is not burn stuff.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of challenges with the charging side of things, but something that's really exciting is the fact that now there is so much work going into charging infrastructure for trucks and vans. So as Elon and Tesla did early doors with the infrastructure of Tesla chargers, which is, let's be honest, really helped the transition, because those Tesla chargers weren't there. Teslas wouldn't have started, multiplying, like bunnies. We need to do something similar for the trucks. We need to get that right, and this is one of the reasons why I got into charging. First of all, because I had enough of the motor trade, but also I'm really passionate about this electrification, because from all the evidence I've seen, it's the way to go.
Beautiful. I love that, and I love that you're putting your creative and your persistent mind as well towards it. I think that's exactly what the planet needs. So
yeah,
good on you.
Thanks, mate. So Joe, tell me more about Foreva Cars. Now, I'm really interested in getting my electric TVR onto Foreva Cars at some point, but please explain to the live listeners and people who watch it later what Foreva Cars is all about.
Yeah, so we wanted to just create as much transparency as possible on the upcycling industry, and to encourage people to adopt upcycling practices where possible, because there are just less emissions. I think it's about 2 to 3 times less emissions. Most of the emissions in a car's body are coming from the large steel parts, so the chassis and the body shell. And so if we don't need to recreate those, there's obviously a massive saving to be had there. So we can either create a new EV, which is amazing because shifting away from fossil fuels is the main thing. But even better than that, if you can, is to upcycle and reuse an existing car. So the more we can encourage people to do that, the better. And obviously there's already a nascent industry that's doing incredibly well with so many amazing, incredible, creative, visionary people in it. Sometimes I'm like, well, how can we even help? But what we'd like to do is maybe support like a sales marketplace and a rental marketplace as well, to give people access to some of these vehicles. I think the rentals could be helpful in particular. So if somebody wants to try an upcycled vehicle, right now they need to know somebody that's got one and ask for a go. So we'd like to create a little mini Turo just for upcycled cars, so people can have a go in them and they'll be like, oh, this is actually really nice. Or like, maybe I will get that little Land Rover Defender commissioned by these Clean Classics or whoever. And so that's the idea of it, is to get people excited, to make it more accessible for people. So we would absolutely love, anybody who's got an upcycled vehicle that's interested in maybe even renting it out, to put it on the rental platform. And we'd also love to work with people who are just beginning in their conversion stages and they need a hand selling a car. So we'd like to create a sales marketplace as well. Eventually, we'd also like to channel investors towards really promising projects and people who are doing really well in the industry. Currently, we're finding that a little bit slow even for ourselves. Like, I think the market in general is just a little bit down. But that's the idea, is to channel money to where it makes sense environmentally. and it still really makes sense environmentally to do an upcycle car. And to have a full self-driving upcycle car would be the absolute epitome. I know there's a lot of challenges involved in that. I don't want to push that here, but I hope someone can overcome some of those challenges as well.
Did you have a chat with Seb in the end?
I've had a chat with him before, and you know, he's definitely like the genius here in terms of hardware and adapting things. And I think he's just very realistic in terms of like all the you know, CAN bus limitations and all of these sorts of different things that would need to be considered. And I think it is a lot of work, and it would be a lot of work for a single team to do. But if there could be a giant industry looking at it holistically in terms of what would it take to be able to retrofit full self-driving kit to any car, how could we create learning algorithms that we can apply to any individual car, so they can then just drive around a certain car park in a certain way, and they're like, oh, that's how we drive this car effectively. Because obviously we've got machine learning that can learn most things, and the rate of acceleration in that field is just going up like a hockey stick. So it doesn't seem like a big jump to suggest that there could be an algorithm, and somebody who works in AI who's really smart hopefully will come up with something like that, and somebody who's really smart in hardware and knows a lot about CAN buses can create a universal structure or a universal way of communicating with all of these things, rather than trying to manually figure out what this code does for which car. So I think it would need like a big industry or a collective vision to come and look at that.
No, from my point of view, I always see the use case for, would you like to borrow this car? And I just think of is it Kate and William, that they had the electric EV converted old school Jaguar, and I think Beckham and Posh and Beckham
got it for his son, was
David and Posh had it, but like a wedding thing. And you know how much people spend on weddings, you know, oh, the wedding car has to be just right, you know. I think there's a market there. There we go. There's a little
that's exactly what Lauren said as well, because we're partnering with Fuel to Electric, because we didn't want to sort of do the same work twice. So we've partnered with Lauren at Fuel to Electric, and obviously the more initial conversions that can come, the more we can create a marketplace around them, and we hope that it's a synergistic sort of setup that we've got. But he mentioned weddings first time we spoke, and he's like, yeah, weddings. Like, yeah, I think that would be a really good place to start. You know, upcycle car for your wedding. So if anybody's interested in an upcycle car for your wedding,
well, I think,
send me a message.
Yeah, weddings or, you know, events and things like that. I mean, I really I wouldn't mind to be used as much as possible. You know, I do get that there's cars out there from car enthusiasts that they want to keep them, you know, garage queens, as I would call them, you know, where they want to keep them pristine and low mileage. But as far as I'm concerned, and, you know, certainly from the Tesla that I've got, you know, absolutely maxing the mileage on that, maxing the mileage on the TVR. Certainly never going to get my money's worth out of that TVR, the amount it's costing me. But, you know, whether I use it in a daily or I rent it out, or take it to shows, I want to make sure that people can see what you can do to give inspiration. I think I gave a couple of people some inspiration. Okay, Zoe wants to drive it for me. Fine. You know, it was really good that I gave some people some inspiration on the electric tricycle that me and a friend built, which mainly my friend, not so much me. I tried to cut my teeth, and my teeth were still blunt after this. Really fun, and you know, it's encouraged others, and I am definitely making lots of mistakes in terms of the electric TVR, so hopefully stopping other people from making as many mistakes. But it's all about, you know, creating that exciting electric car as environmentally friendly as possible. You know, we don't need to buy, you know, I suppose the only car to compare the TVR that we're building is the MG Roadster, which looks like an amazing car, which looks, you know, high tech. It's shiny, it's new, it's from China, it's new, you know, all the CO2 emissions. It's probably going to cost the same as my TVR, but would it be as exciting to drive an MG? I mean, probably not. That'd be a good back-to-back test, perhaps. Zoe, you can drive the MG. I'll drive the TVR. How about that? But yeah, that will be an interesting test.
That sounds it. And I think in regards to what you're talking about with, you know, mental health as well, I think having community is so key. You know, it's very easy to disconnect these days and just be behind a screen. So actually having projects that you work on collaboratively together, you know, in a decentralized way, it doesn't have to, we don't have to rely on OEMs to produce these things at scale. It's having these small teams of communities all around the world that are just doing on the things that they really like working on.
Yeah, you've reminded me that we don't, and this is why I wanted to start the monthly meets. It's one thing, you know, doing it on the channel, but you know, the monthly meets have been great. So we haven't done one in December. We did one last month at Caffeine and Machine Stratford, which was really successful. The one the month before, which was a really good starter. We've got the other one. Oh, knocked myself out there. The next EV meet is going to be on the, I want to say the 6th. No, it is the 6th. The 6th of January next year. So it's not long, and we're going to have an EV meet there at Caffeine and Machine. So I'll send out more details on that and where to get the tickets. It's Caffeine and Machine. It will be at the Bedford. I say Bedford. It's just outside of Bedford. So anyone that's got an electric car or who's enthusiastic about electric cars or cars in general, just wants to come and have a poke and a prod with what's going to be down there. I've got no idea what's going to be down there yet, so it'll be interesting to see who turns up. Last time we had a Tesla powered Lotus Evora, which was extremely exciting. So yeah, so if anybody wants to come along, it's the Bowl, Caffeine and Machine on the 6th, and it'll probably be in the morning. I'll probably do it a bit later this time, probably 10 or 11, but yeah, look out on the socials, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, all the other ones, and YouTube channel. So yeah. Oh, what we got? Okay, if it's not snowing. Oh, great. So it sounds like we'll have an EV converted Beetle there. Good to know. Doesn't the Beetle work in the snow, John? I'm pretty sure it does. Just put a warmer jacket on. I'll bring some hot coffee. MySpace. I did used to be on MySpace. I don't know how old you are, Joe. Do you remember MySpace?
I do remember MySpace. Did you? Was it Tom? Was Tom your friend? Was he the founder of MySpace?
Tom,
I think it was everybody's default friend, the first friend you have when you first joined.
I
might be
I don't know. So long ago, mate. It was so long ago. We got something else from Foxhound that I missed here, like the new Dutch small sports EV, the L7 quadricycle. Oh no, I didn't see that. I must admit, I drove the electric Carver, which was an interesting vehicle. It's a bit like my Trike. It kind of leans to the left and the right. Very interesting to drive. It was quite exciting to drive, but I was let down by the power. It was just a little bit lackluster, and I'm a bit of a power freak, if I'm being honest, Joe. Unless it's so dangerous, and this is what I love about my electric tricycle. It is fast, but the brakes are awful, and it does feel like you're going to die at any moment, which is great. So
yeah.
And apparently Zoe says it was indeed Tom from MySpace. So
good to know.
It was good to know. I'm just trying to think if there's so much we could cover on this channel, but I suppose we could keep it we've done an hour. Did you want to leave it there? Did you want to leave it there, Joe, or do you want to carry on a bit more?
We can come back in maybe 6 months, a year, and see how things are shifting. I mean, I'd love to.
I'm hoping, praying that the TVR will be done by then, and you'd have maybe had a jump in it. So yeah,
that'd be amazing.
Come back in 6 months' time.
I just thought I was driving the other day and up to Bristol because I'm in Dorset, and we went past the Haynes Motor Museum as well. And I was thinking that might be a nice place for a meet at some stage as well.
Nice.
There's a few little nice things around the area, so I was like,
well, I am looking for places. The next meet after January may well be in Reading, because I hear that there is a Caffeine and Machine type place there in Reading. It'd be good to see if maybe moving locations might bring a few people that might not have the range, or
true,
unintended, or
Reading is well located as well, isn't it? It's very, very easy to get to.
I'd love to see the TVR at the hill climb. Yes, yeah, that would be good. There's a bit of a fault with the TVR in the fact that it hasn't got limit slip diff. So I need, before any kind of exciting stuff, I need to do that, because one wheel peel is just not my cup of tea. But no, thanks everyone for watching. Just to kind of update people, the next few weeks I have got a guest every Thursday. Next week we've got Clive coming on, so we're going to be talking about Similar sort of environmental stuff, but also about modified electric cars, because he's a massive car nut like me. And then the week after that, we've got week after that, I can't remember who's on, but the week after that, we've got some EV engineers, and then the week after that, we've got Ewan. But what I'll do, so I remember everyone's names, because I'm rubbish at that, like I said at the start, Joe, is that I'll put up a diary of who's coming each week, just so everyone can, you know, tune in specifically live if they've got a question for you know, whoever's on or me. So thanks very much indeed. Oh, here we go. Mods
breakfast meats. There we go.
There we go. I think that might be on the. I'm more than happy to bring, you know, Rusty, all the way down there, because it's a jaunt. But I've made it down to Yorkshire EV car meet. But you know, if I've got the range, I've got the will. If people are going to be there, I'll be there for sure. So yeah, thanks for the. Maybe we'll do that.
Maybe a summer one. It's quite nice around there in the summer as well.
Yeah, I might not want to come back. I love that neck of the woods. I might have had a few too many ciders, a few too many rattlers.
That's it.
Yeah. On that note, right, thank you very much. Thanks for everyone tuning in today, and I will see you next Thursday at 8 o'clock. And yeah, thank you very much for listening and watching. Cheers, Joe. Thanks for coming on board. Take care.